Thank you so much. So that was a composition of Caili's, and I'm going to let her introduce it and tell you the backstory. I will reveal one behind-the-scenes thing that I suggested we do this one first for two reasons. One, because it is a lovely way to start the afternoon, or start this portion of the afternoon, and two, because I heard her and Cory perform this one a few months ago in a concert, and there was two sets, and she actually performed it in both sets, and it did not come out of my head for weeks, if not months. And so I wanted to give you the courtesy of not putting it at the end of the show and having you, although if you buy the CD, then you can create your own earworm. But I want you to have agency over, earworm autonomy, what would you call that? In any case, so she's going to tell you about the two.
So this song is called Quarantine Dream, and it's actually the title track off of my second album, which came out in June 2022. I wrote this song in March 2020 in the first lockdown of COVID, when I had COVID, and this was the song that brought me back to the piano. Every day I would when I was feeling better, I was trying to make my way back to the piano. It was a very, scary time, and I just kept playing that song on repeat, and it was very healing for me, very soothing, and music has a way of being so healing for myself, but I hope also for you. And that song, I just had it in my head on loop, so that's where that song came from, Quarantine Dream.
Thank you. Yeah. So I can just keep throwing out questions all day, but what we're here for is for you to be able to engage with our wonderful, musically skilled and also very friendly guest artists. So does anyone have any questions to start with? Okay. Oh yes, please, thank you.
Well, Cory and I have been playing together for maybe 11 or 12 years. 12 years. We are married, so that's a fun fact. But we have been playing together since 2011. Yeah, we met at the Stanford Jazz Workshop in California at Stanford University. We were both teaching there for a teaching mentorship. And we've been playing together ever since. So I would say a lot of our music that we've written in the past 10 or 11 years has heavily been influenced by playing together. We practice together a lot. We listen to music a lot together. So it's kind of a special, way to create. Did
you want to add to that, Cory? Or I guess it was a fairly straightforward question. But.
Yes, and for Noah and I, this is our second time playing together, and as always, it always feels magical. It feels like a long lost brother.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's our second time playing together in person. We did
Yes.
one socially distanced video also.
Yes.
Freebird, and I'm not making that up. We'll talk. But yeah.
Yes.
And George, go ahead.
Before you played together before, and how much preparation did you have for this particular?
So to answer your first question, not before today. Again, Cory, Henry, and I played one background music gig like a year and a half ago, and Caili and I have not played together before. She and Henry just met, and we practiced for 45 minutes, an hour this morning. Now, to be clear, this is the point where the breaking the fourth wall becomes particularly important, because I could say, look at us, we're so magical and telepathic that we managed to throw this together but yes. Thank you. And also, Henry and I did our homework and learned the tunes, and we came in prepared. We didn't just throw it together just based on the pure majesty of tapping into some sonic wavelength together.
So it's just like your rock band where you all listen to the records and know the tunes, and then you come together and you're right.
I guess. I mean, maybe, I don't know, less cheap beer being consumed, but yes, in spirit, there is a certain coming together, already having a common ground on the music in question, which in this case is not Freebird. Yes, Noah.
If you try to tell us that you guys have never practiced, I would call your bluff. So I was just shelving books for the library, and I heard you guys practicing when I was on the second floor.
Right. See, this is why I have to be honest in giving answers to these questions, because you never know who's here or what inside information they have access to. I think executive decision, we're going to play another one before we open up to more questions, and the questions will, of course, organically emerge as you hear new sounds. Cory, do you want to introduce this one?
Yes, the next selection that we're going to play, it's entitled Luna Lovejoy. My sister-in-law bought a black lab 4 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and rescued. And her name is Luna. And Luna Lovejoy Maxwell. Maxwell. And I fell in love with her after meeting her. And of course, I was in the piano lab and this song just came about. So I was inspired by Luna.
Thank you. And I would like to point out that this tune is also on an album, not one that I think is on the table over there, but by a collective ensemble called New Faces, on which both Caili and Cory appear. So you can find this one and listen to it over and over again on the interwebs, regardless of whether you buy a CD. that was fun. Might there be other questions at this time? Why, yes.
So it's unusual to hear two pianists playing. So I'm just curious for both of you, what are like the fun things about doing that, and what are the challenges?
I will say there's a certain, there's a degree to which it is easier because Caili is playing with a piano sound on the keyboard, and I'm playing with electric piano and organ sound. So there's a bit of sonic difference. In that sense, it's maybe a little more like piano and guitar in that we're not competing with the exact same instrument tone. But I'll let you actually answer the question directly before I do.
I love that question. It's so fun. I really like, it's very, very unusual for me to get to play with another pianist, at least in a setting with a rhythm section, because sometimes there'll be two pianos by themselves, and that's also cool. But in this configuration where I'm playing piano and Noah's playing more organ and Rhodes, it's so cool because the roles are very different. Like, for instance, when Noah's playing organ, there's a lot more sustained chords, and there's a lot more use of different textures, drawbar settings and stuff that he's able to access, where I am not messing with the sound at all. There's nothing that I'm doing. It's just it's like I was playing an acoustic piano. That is basically the role that I'm taking. So it's very fun for me to get to hear. I mean, I guess it would be similar to the way that we're used to playing with guitar players, because it's very common for piano to play with a guitar player, and you're wanting to think about the range, like, for instance, if Noah's playing something in the high range, maybe I'm going to play something in the lower range. If Noah's holding out chords for a long time, maybe I'll play more rhythmic chords. So we're trying to find ways to differentiate between the roles of the band. But essentially, we're both harmonic instruments, so we're both creating all the colors. And it's very fun to get to share that role, with another pianist.
Thank you. I agree that it's fun. I think the other thing that I will say, in addition to all of that, is that in an ensemble, the piano serves a rhythmic role and a harmonic role, and sometimes a melodic role. But which is to say, there's the chords, and then there's the rhythms and how that's being put forth. Personally, as a musician, rhythm is paramount for me, and so I imagine I would enjoy this less if I were less rhythmically inclined and more fussy about the minutia of harmony, such that the fleeting moments where we play things that are not as synchronized as they could be, like there are if we were to go back with surgical precision and listen to what we just did, there would be moments where how I played a chord and how Caili played a chord probably clashed. But because I was focused, I mean, they were fleeting and mild enough moments that it didn't disrupt anything. And to me, the rhythmic excitement of how we're able to play off each other is more important than nitpicking about that stuff. But again, some pianists are more particular about the minutia of their chord choices than I might be, and therefore more apt to and there's a lot of pianists who don't like playing with guitar players for that very reason.
Actually, one challenge I'll add is that sometimes the way that we phrase the melody could be more loose. So some of the times we're phrasing the melody together, we're trying to kind of compromise on how we phrase it. It's like oftentimes when you read a melody in jazz music, it never gets played the way that it's written. That's why jazz music is such an oral tradition. It's something that was taught by ear. People learned from records, from concerts. So I think because of that, a challenge can be that we phrase the melody differently just because that's each of our interpretation. And it's not always exactly the way it's written. So it can make it difficult when two people are playing the melody. We might phrase it slightly differently, and maybe it won't line up 100%. But I think because we have different sounds, it really doesn't matter. Yeah, or it doesn't matter anyways.
Doesn't matter any more than it would if I were a saxophone player. So I saw one question back there, and then I will get to yours. Thank you. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you were saying. A lot of people think that perfection is the enemy of the good. I would say that perfection is the enemy of the great, and you guys are great.
Well, thank you, and I will say that there. I mean, along the lines of what I was saying about fussiness, there is an extent in jazz, and those of you who have heard a bunch of live jazz, whether in this setting or otherwise, this is not news to you, but different musicians have different relationships to risk-taking. And I don't know exactly how I would quantify where any of us fits on that continuum, but I would say that it's the more you are seeking the transcendent, the more you have to accept a certain degree of mess along the way. And so I not that this is particularly messy, but some musicians, improvisation being not like a monolith. It's not like something is completely planned out or it's completely improvised. Every time someone asks how you're doing and you don't look at your script to make sure that you are responding in exactly the way that you premeditated, you're improvising, but how much you lean into that improvisation versus having it be just a little bit of leeway, that's part of what makes this music so beautiful, is that everybody has their own relationship with that. And, so yes.
I'm a drummer and I have a question for Cory. When do you use your wrist while humming and when do you use your fingers?
When did I use my wrists versus fingers?
Yeah.
Fingers, I use fingers for speed, and I typically use more wrists for power. So, so fingers for speed, wrists for power, but you have to kind of tread lightly because with that power you can really hurt yourself. So you kind of want to balance it out between fingers and wrists for power as well. So if it's all wrists, it could lead to injuring yourself because constant hitting and shocking from the bounce of the metal, it affects you. I mean, after 30 years of playing, you start to like really feel it. So it's all about balance, yeah. But the speed, it's all in the fingers.
Well, so this is the part of the afternoon that you've all been waiting for. It is where I shut up for a moment. For real, I'm going to let them play one without me. But Caili, would you like to introduce
Yeah,
this?
sure. So the next song we're going to play is a song that I wrote for my mom. It's called Gearoidin, which is my mom's name, Gearoidin, in Irish. My mom is from Ireland, and so this is part of a suite that I started writing for her in 2021. Long hiatus, 2 years, but I just finished writing the rest of it, which is 13 more songs. I've been working on it for the past 3 months nonstop, and it's complete. I got a grant through this great organization, Chamber Music America. So that's going to be coming out in 2025 in an album form, but I will have some concerts coming up with the extended version. So right now this is unreleased, but this is called Gearoidin, and hope you enjoy.
I have a question. And this is for both of you, maybe most immediately for the tune you just played, but both of you, and we've already played compositions by both of you that are, and we'll do more, that are depictions of particular people or particular emotional relationships with how you deal with the world, which is to say that it's not just, here's a tune and these are some notes that I like and I'm going to slap a title on it. And I'd love either, or ideally both of your perspectives on, to whatever extent you can discuss or quantify this, how do you work with that when you're composing? How do you factor in the thing that you're trying to evoke with the composition or what the inspiration is, and how do you know when you've gotten it, so to speak?
Yeah, well, so for this song in particular, there's kind of an interesting story, which is that my dad, who's actually here, he's visiting from Portland, Oregon, where I'm from. My dad was a musician when he was younger, a guitarist, pianist, and mainly in rock bands. But he wrote a song for my mom like 30-something years ago, and we were cleaning out the house and came across this sheet music that he had kind of written it out, but he was very self-taught and he didn't have formal training in the sense of like writing things out. So I was playing through what he had written, and there was he was like, oh, that note's not right. So we were kind of fixing up his chart, but he remembered it. He remembered what the song sounded like, and he had this kind of shape to the song, which was this voice, which is kind of just a shape, and I thought it was such an interesting way of writing music, very different than how I had written music up until that point. It's very non-theoretical, but just from a sound perspective and a shape, and I think coming from being a guitarist, a lot of things are shape-oriented, so I was exploring taking the song that he had written, but trying to, make my own off of that. So that's kind of where this song came from. But I do think that for me personally, in a more abstract sense, not quite as literal, music is extremely healing for me, and I think it puts words to things that I can't necessarily voice in words. The sounds of music and the ability to control different chords and melodies can make me feel something, if not anybody else, So I think I use music in that way a lot, to vocalize the way that I feel about something, or to give a sound, which to me is very healing, because I've always played piano since I was a child, since I was 5 years old. So for me, the act of playing music and to create something is very therapeutic for me. So I think that's just an extension. Hopefully that translates to you also, that when you hear it, you can, even if you don't understand the full context of why I wrote the song or what the meaning is behind it, that you feel something, and maybe it gives a sound to an experience in your life that, might be healing or might make you feel something, So I think that's where I come from when I write anything. If it doesn't make me feel something, I will throw it out. Like the idea of writing music from a theoretical standpoint, because it technically makes sense, that doesn't mean anything to me, really. Even though I understand how to do it, I just don't write like that. So that's a long answer, but that's...
Thank you.
Yeah. How about you, Ko?
So piano was my first instrument, but I could never get myself to do what they're doing, and drums just naturally came easy to me. So as a child, my grandmother made me practice, and studying the classical stuff, I got a little bored with that, but I just started playing random stuff and exploring. And then when I started having more formal training in college, I learned about like 12-tone writing in the works of like Darius Milhaud, and this idea of 12-tone writing, or just utilizing a note and creating a system in which you take this linear approach of going from a note to another note before you repeat an idea. I wrote a lot of songs like that in college, so from a technical standpoint, I wrote a lot of songs that I didn't connect with, or didn't really make sense, but the idea of like using notes and trying to go through the system before repeating, it started to like kind of click with me. Then I started using motivic development. Then the idea of using repetition, and then song form. So to answer your question, I love to just explore and becoming comfortable with the idea of, you know, my work not sounding like the finished product. So as drummers, as musicians, I think it's important for you to just sit down and write whether or not it makes sense. So after the final product of what I created, my tunes, they've all started in kind of weird place, but ultimately I kind of fell in love with it, and then it started to like mean something. So don't be afraid to just write if there's any musicians in the house.
Or create.
Yeah.
Anything. Yeah.
Amen. Thank you. Do we have, yes, Thomas?
When you compose for it, do you generally start by sitting down at the kit and writing from there, or do you write the melodic parts first? What's your approach to writing for a whole group?
That's a good question. I rarely write from the drum set, which is actually kind of funny because a lot of times I'll sit down, I'll have this melody, and then I'll just like repeat it, and I'll try to figure out the harmony behind it. And then I'll have a final product, and I'll play with the band, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to play on the drums because I put all this other work into all the other aspects like melody, harmony, and other stuff. But to answer your question, my process usually always starts with this repetitive idea that I'm kind of singing in my head, or I'll hear a chord and I'll just play with it, and I'll expand with different voicings on the top, and I'll try to sing that, and then like try to use some like counter harmony, imagining what would it sound like with someone complimenting this leading voice that I have on top. So my process usually starts on the piano or away from the kit, to answer your question.
He's very proficient on the piano. He's not making it sound like that, but he practices the piano a lot, and the organ and the bass. So harmonic instruments, a lot of drummers don't play harmonic instruments, but I think, right, so you do understand harmony and all that stuff, yeah, deeply.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, George.
Answer that question, and Henry, too, if you wrote.
Yes.
The question that I asked?
Yeah.
For me, if I'm trying to evoke something or someone when I'm writing, I have certain sort of wonky technique, which is to say, theoretically based techniques where I'll often use text, which I know something Caili is into. Like I'll have a phrase, maybe it's a whole sentence, sometimes it's a whole passage, sometimes it's just a couple words, and that will spark a melodic idea, and the melodic idea will then be the germ of so some of you, the Middletownians among you, are familiar with our dear and departed state rep and friend of many folks here, Q Williams. So I wrote a piece after his passing this year that it's fairly elaborate, but it just began with the germ of the phrase Brother Q, and that turned into, and then everything else kind of stemmed from there. We're not playing that one today, but just as a recent example. But most often I just try to start with a solid emotional picture of my relationship with what or who I'm depicting, and I essentially, there's the trope about people who do granite carving or plaster carving, sculptors or wood carving. They see the finished sculpture and they just chip away everything that isn't that. And essentially that's kind of what I do. Sometimes I'll write away from the instrument and just hear stuff in my head and sing it or write it down. But it's like, okay, if it feels like, okay, this deepens and amplifies the emotion that I'm trying to evoke or reminds me of the person or whatever it is, then I develop that and I keep going with it. And if like, no, that's a thing that might sound cool for something else, then I'll write it down and stock it away for later. But sort of trying to attune that inner compass, so to speak, so that when the sounds that align with that come, I recognize them as such. And then, as Caili was saying, maybe that conveys to somebody else or maybe it doesn't, but at least I know that it's genuine if I'm doing it that way.
Oh, I don't write a lot, but when I do have ideas that I write down, they're almost always at the piano. I know how to play enough piano to get a simple voicing and a chord out of, and a melody out of. I'm lucky enough to always have somebody's music on my stand, and when I do have time, I really enjoy playing music that's already out there, so I don't make a lot of time for writing. Maybe one day I will, but right now, when I do come up with something, it's usually away from the bass, so yeah.
And you're constantly creating over the music that's been written for you.
Well, I find being a side person so stimulating. Like playing the ballad that would just play like, A, what's on the page, and then what's happening, and then okay, so the chord is D major 7 sharp 5. It could be I could play something completely different. I do play something completely different every pass through it, and it's always so that's really what's stimulating to me. It's what drew me to playing jazz bass. As opposed to when I started as a younger musician playing in funk and rock bands, I found sometimes that the parts were repetitive, and then when someone said, hey, what do you want to join jazz band or whatever, and I was like, oh, I can kind of make up my own bass part every time I go through this. I was like, that's cool. Like, so that's really what gets me going. Is I really do feel like I get so much out of being a side person. That's the idea.
Thank you. And that's why we haven't gotten bored of each other in 21 years, because we're not just playing the same stuff over and over again. But I guess our playing relationship is officially drinking age this fall, so we should go bottoms up. But Michael, is it cool if we play one more and then I'll get to your question? Thank you. Do you want to set this one up? Set it up, meaning tell us what's happening.
Okay. So as Caili was saying, we met years ago at Stanford, right when we started dating. She went to Paris, and of course I missed her. So I was shedding piano, watching this Chick Corea 1980s instructional video, and I was taking ideas from it. I was just studying it, and then I came up with this idea, and as I was thinking of her, the original name of the song was called While Caili's in Paris. And then when we recorded for the record, she did not want that name on the record. And so I grew up playing music in church, so the song kind of reminded me of, if any of you have ever gone to church, you have the offering time or the portion, and there's usually music behind, well, depending on the denomination. But the name of the song now is called Offering Time, and it has a bit of a churchy vibe, so yeah.
fun tune. So I promised Michael I'd get to your question next. What you got for us?
Well, now I played that track, and I really was complimenting on the track before this. The pianist is very, very passionate, and I did feel something personal when you played that. And along with the percussionist, I saw, how you were using your apparatus, different the mallets and stuff like that, One I wanted to, and then I'll comment on the last track you just played, but I was just wanting to say you guys complement each other, especially on that song. It was exceptional. Who are your influences as far as the percussionist?
Oh, in a nutshell, everyone. To me, I grew up listening to everyone in church, and there was always this competitive thing, like, oh, you're better, this person is a goat, da da da. But I've always, since I started really young, I wanted to just dive into music with the understanding that everyone has something beautiful to offer. So my greatest inspiration really comes from the people that I'm playing with. So I try to just support everyone. If someone says something, I try to acknowledge it and use that as a form of repetition to show like, hey, you said this, I'm acknowledging you said this, and I'm supporting your argument or your statement. So all drummers, all musicians inspire me, really.
Well, you couldn't have picked two of the most exceptional people to play along with Mr. Henry Lugo and Mr. Noah Baerman, because these guys are exceptionally wonderful. Also, the last track you played, you definitely hear Return Forever all over that. And I just lost thought what I wanted to say on that, but definitely you hear the chicoria and everything all over that. It was a little jumpy, a little R&B-ish, a little funky, and a little like what chicoria brings to the forum when he was still here on Earth.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Scott.
As a couple, you have a very clear and enjoyable musical personality. I'd be interested to know when you're together, what music you listen to, and what music would you listen to only when you're not together?
That's a good question. I think, we listen to a lot of different music, but I would say in general, jazz music, we listen to a lot of gospel music. We like hip hop, R&B. What else? Like Zydeco, he's from Texas, so we check out some Zydeco music. I would say, I'm from Portland, Oregon, so I grew up listening more to like the Beatles and Elliott Smith, Sufjan Stevens, more from like the indie rock folk, genre, which I haven't kept up on super well in the past 10 years, but I would say I would have been more into that on my own. He grew up like on Luther Vandross and Earth, Wind & Fire and stuff like that. So I would say we listen to more of that stuff now. But I think I check out more current artists, maybe. Like, I'm always checking out new people constantly. If someone has a new album, I'm like checking it out, and then I show him. I'm like, oh, did you hear this album? So I don't know, does that seem accurate?
Yeah, that's very accurate. And to answer the second part of your question, the music that we listen to while we're not together, more so is probably country music. She can't stand it.
You like country music?
So anytime I get a chance between that and podcasts, I'm always just,
This next song is not a country song, but do you want to set this one up, Caili?
Oh, yeah. So the next song we're going to play is another original of mine. This is called Salt and Vinegar. And we were talking about how we compose, and another way that I like to compose is check out some of my favorite composers and try to write compositions that are in the style of them. And so, I think in particular with this one, I was thinking about writing something super dissonant. And so, yeah, this is salt and vinegar. Salt and vinegar chips are also my favorite chips. Now they have almonds and pistachios also that are salt and vinegar, so that's also very good. And yeah, so this is salt and vinegar. Yeah. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
while your hands are in proximity to one another, Cory Cox on the drums. I should say the drums and the pen, and Caili O'Doherty on piano and pen. I guess that's an antiquated statement now that we mostly write stuff down on computers, but I guess in the same sense of calling something a record when it doesn't necessarily exist in that form. But in any case, we jazz musicians like our classic terminology. Thank you. And how about for Henry Lugo on the bass?
How about Noah Baerman?
I would, before I take the last round of questions, like to put in, and we've got one more tune, but put in one plug. If you have musicians or other artists in your life, or are one yourself, we are a few weeks away still from the September deadline for Claire's Continuum applications. This is Resonant Motion sponsors a commissioning program. This will be the third season of doing that in dedication to our friend Claire Randall. And you can read more about it. Come talk to me if you're interested in this and you'd like to apply for a Claire's Continuum commission. And I'm bringing this up in part because the last round in 2021, Caili was one of our Claire's Continuum artists. And so I got to see a little bit of the inside of her compositional process there too, which was quite inspiring to see. And on the subject of dedications, in the overwhelm of naming our funders, to whom we are, of course, very grateful, I neglected to mention that this year's Jazz Up Close series is dedicated to the memory of our dear friend of Resonant Motion, friend of Jazz Up Close, and friend of and longtime employee of the Russell Library, Carol Schultz. If you look to your right, the painting on the wall, that's a painting by Carol's husband, David Schultz, and you can see Carol in the nook there in the painting, reading a book. So, so we've got one more tune, but are there any more questions in this last round before we get there? Yes, Don.
I heard that you started a series of songs about your mother. I'm curious about the way titles are generally selected. You started your 13-round series with Your Mother and Mine. But how about Salt and Vinegar? Did you have that one in mind to start with? Or are there occasions when you have a melody that you write out but you really don't know what to call it, and the title comes later?
Well, this is not an impressive answer, but I am terrible with titles. And my 13-part commission thing that I've been working on for the past 3 months, they're called Composition 1, Composition 2. So if you have any good titles, no. I'm terrible at, anything with lyrics or words. I mean, I've used them as a tool for composing. I've used lyrics or text as a way to help me compose, but as far as putting meaning behind with words, it's very, very hard for me. So all of these songs, I was like, oh, what should I call them? Like they have a purpose and a meaning, and oftentimes a way that I wrote them, but as putting a specific title on it, it's hard for me. Like Salt and Vinegar, for instance, it's very dissonant. And I was like, what is something that's, dissonant? And I thought Salt and Vinegar is kind of dissonant, so that's how I got that. But a lot of other songs that I've written, Gearoidin, I wrote that for my mom. What was the other one that we played? Oh, Quarantine Dream. So that was kind of, because of COVID. So and it was the timing that I wrote it. But as far as naming this 13-part suite that I wrote, I have no clue. So I'll be working on that. That'll probably take me longer than writing the music. Yeah.
And you, sir?
Yeah,
It goes both ways. A lot of times I'll flirt with the idea of a theme. So the theme was Luna Lovejoy. So I wanted something Lovejoy, happy, uplifting, upbeat, and I started thinking somewhat of a rhythm, not like verbatim, but just like, what's kind of an upbeat tempo. And so with the metronome marking, everything else just kind of came into place. So yeah, it goes both ways. You can use a title as a theme or like the entire alphabet. So A through Z. So if I'm starting with A, sometimes I can do something a little goofy and just be like, I'm gonna write a song in the key of A, and then write a song with a lot of the tonic, the one in the melody, and it might sound corny, but as I was saying before, it's important for you to like go through that entire process of being corny and then like seeing what you come up with.
And I will simply say that it is one of the interesting things about doing predominantly instrumental music is that I suppose there's plenty of examples of songs with lyrics where the title is something only tangentially related to the subject matter, but we kind of get to decide what the subject matter is, and that really can range anything from here's this very specific thing that was in my head before I committed the first note to paper to I wrote a tune and I'm walking into the recording session and the engineer's saying, what is this thing called? And, you know, I like elbow. I've certainly had that experience. When I was in my 20s, I wrote my first series of instructional books, and I had to have titles for all of the little etudes in there. And I was literally like looking around my apartment, like, sponge on a stick, okay. That literally is one of the tunes. So, and you know, so that's all I'll say about that. I could go on forever, but and don't be looking for sponge on a stick in the record stores unless you have that book. In which case, feel free to use it to work on improvising in the key of D major. Any more questions? Yes.
It's not a question, it's a comment to you, actually. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to articulate this well because for some reason I'm like full of emotions.
I'm glad. Thank you.
But I wanted to say that thank you. In my life, my truest experience of seeing and listening to greatness in music has been being exposed through jazz clubs. And I want to say to you that I know a lot of us are not aware of the constant emails or not getting a response, and you constantly being, you know, I gotta get them here to form like an afternoon of today. And I just wanted to thank you for your hard work and persistence.
Thank you. Thank you. One, thank you. And two, and I hope this doesn't sound like deflecting because I'm being completely genuine here. It's difficult for me to imagine many places where it would be gratifying enough to keep doing that stuff but I mean, this is, in the end, one does not become a jazz musician for wealth and fame. Young budding jazz musicians here, I'm sorry to we do it because, I mean, forgive me if you've heard this rant before, but it really is like clergy, where you don't do this for any reason other than, you don't, you know, on the level where you commit your life's work to it and so on, for any reason other than you get a calling and you choose to obey. I mean, everybody on this bandstand, I think it's safe to say everybody we've had as guests could have done something with their lives where they would have made more money and gotten more respect from society at large. But, you know, you don't go into the clergy because you like do a spreadsheet of cost-benefit analysis of different professions. You do it because there's a sort of sacred duty and you happen to have been called. And what feeds us, I mean, aside from like quinoa salad and stuff, is one last chance for a corny joke in there. Yeah. So what feeds us is feeling like we're really connecting with people and feeling like, and this the reason I do this. See, you got me going. I'm emotional too. The reason I do this is because I truly believe that there is depth and nourishment in this music that some people who could be nourished in that way don't access simply because they feel like the music is at arm's length. They feel like they're not educated enough about it to be good enough listeners or whatever. And I've just had so many experiences, many of them in this room, where people are able to find that nourishment just because the music and the people who make it are made a little bit more accessible, and without actually having to water down the substance to get there. And so if it is having that effect, that is very gratifying, and thank you for sharing that.
Great.
And I see two more hands. Go ahead, Noah.
No, what you said reminds me of a song that my uncle wrote. My uncle lives in Michigan. He's a fiddle, guitar, mandolin, not folk, kind of bluegrassing folk in Michigan. He wrote a song from when I was growing up. I don't want to be originally famous. I just want to be well off and well known.
That's awesome. I'd love to hear that. Thank you. Go ahead, Michael. You get the coda. Go for it.
More quick.
Yeah.
To piggyback the gentleman that spoke beforehand. Yes, you've opened up doors for people to come here to endure the music and the artists that you brought here. And I just got to be an intern at WBSU, and believe me, I go in and I talk to the jazz guy. There's a guy on Thursday, Bill Benner. And we talk about a lot of stuff, and I guess he knows you as well. And we talk about different artists, and like Todd Marcus with the bass clarinet, and all kinds of different artists is Uriah Israel, and as well as, you know, the artists today and other artists that have been here. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Please continue. Like you said, please be a clergy to our people, because it's absolutely delicious.
Thank you. Thank you. And I promise you that only in this moment has it occurred to me how that segues into this last tune, but I'd like to think I was clever enough to have contrived that. But do you want to set this one up, Cory? Tell us what we're about to be hearing.
Thank you so much for lending your ears. We're going to close out this set, the composition I wrote, once again, while I was after many years of like exploring and doing a lot of wrong and just getting to the point of being comfortable, which is what life is all about. So I wrote this song week 2 in northern Italy on the tour, finishing up. I felt like I need to decompress. And I sat down at a piano, and my spirit was telling me, I need to get to a place where what is that? The namaste, like the whole, like finding my zen and being centered. So I wrote this song called Grace. It's influenced from my church experience. So it has a bit of a churchy vibe. So I hope you enjoy Grace.
about one more time for Henry Lugo on the bass? Cory Cox on the drums and the pen. Caili O'Doherty on the piano and the pen. My name is Baerman. Thank you so much for being here. And I have three instructions, requests for you. One is mark your calendars for October 28th with Gregory Tardy, our last Jazz Up Close of this season. Two is please visit the table on your way out. If you have something to contribute, great, but just sign up on the mailing list, pick up a CD, or just come say hi to these lovely folks and thank them in person. And the last thing is be kind to one another. Thank you very much.